the ITN News.
Good evening. This is the news from ITN. Tonight's headlines. The deadlocked peace talks. Israelis say there's progress. PLO says we need more concessions. A council tells Safari Holiday Centre no more foreign trips. And a late Christmas for the freed British lorry drivers. Israel and the PLO talked peace again today to sort out their deadlock. But the crucial meeting ended with both sides seeing things differently. The Israelis declared there'd been a meeting of minds on key issues. But Mr. Yasser Arafat said he still needed changes and would be putting forward amendments. One thing was agreed, the hoped-for breakthrough hadn't happened.
Late tonight, the man on whom so much depends was back in the Egyptian capital. Yasser Arafat engaged in yet more exhaustive diplomacy. Further delay and confusion have descended on the Middle East peace process as Arafat met with President Mubarak for these urgent late-night talks. The 3 days of crisis negotiations have now ended between the Israelis and the Palestinians. Both sides reported progress, but the great breakthrough required did not occur. As Israeli Foreign Minister Shimon Peres and a top Palestinian left the meeting, Arafat is reported to have already rejected the compromise deal, calling it a humiliation. This evening, as Peres returned to Israel to brief Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin, he told reporters that the start of Israel's withdrawal from Gaza and Jericho was still some weeks away. Nor have they agreed on who should control the international borders, a key symbol for the Palestinians, a key security concern for the Israelis. And in the occupied Gaza Strip, the impatience for Israel's withdrawal was in evidence again today. Palestinians still marching, still waiting for the time when they will take over the running of Gaza. But it still leaves Arafat facing a double crisis. Not only is full agreement with the Israelis proving very elusive, but there is a growing rebellion within the ranks of the PLO. Many here are openly questioning his leadership skills, even at this critical stage. Robert Moore, ITN, Jerusalem.
The council that sent a young criminal on a £7,000 African safari has called a halt to any more foreign trips. The government is also sending out guidelines in a bid to crack down on such schemes. But tonight it's been revealed that 2 more youngsters are abroad at the moment.
At the controversial centre in North Wales, they defy critics, saying they simply don't understand the complex treatment involved. And they defend the cost of £1,800 per week per person. The centre's director says it's much cheaper than locking people up.
I can't emphasize enough that we do not send young people on holiday. We send people on intensive, individual therapeutic programs, and these take place abroad. And there's a very marked difference between going on holiday and going abroad for an intensive treatment program.
The youngster and his social services minder travelled 13,000 miles. He swam in the Red Sea, cruised on the River Nile, toured the Sphinx and the pyramids, went on safari in Kenya and saw the Victoria Falls.
Well, I think most people would say that the Social Services Committee and welfare workers in Gloucestershire have taken leave of their senses. It's obviously wrong to reward people for their wrongdoing. It's obviously an abuse of taxpayers' money, and it doesn't even work.
The Social Services Department, who footed the bill, will now review their policies.
We are concerned about the public perception of the trips abroad, and that we will now be reviewing our work with juveniles, and during that review we will be stopping any further trips abroad.
On a recent visit, the Duchess of York had high praise for the centre's work, but the government's clearly unhappy with this sort of treatment.
It brings the whole system into disrepute. If kids learn that every time they commit offence after offence after offence, they're only going to get a slap on the wrist or sent on a holiday.
The government will be issuing guidelines suggesting that such schemes, where they exist, have a harsh and demanding regime. However, they also admit they're only guidelines, and it's up to social services departments whether they abide by them or not. Mark Webster, ITN, Westminster.
Bomb squad teams are on standby tonight after another firebomb was found in a boot shop in the West Country. The bomb found at Helston in Cornwall was one of a number planted in the area in the last 24 hours.
The bomb disposal teams were still busy tonight dealing with the latest firebomb, the 3rd in Cornwall in 24 hours. They're thought to be the work of a group of animal rights extremists, the same that's already sent letter bombs to figures connected with the pharmaceutical industry. These bombs have all been concealed in Boots hair care products. Innocent on the outside, police warn they're potentially lethal. As one of the biggest suppliers of drugs in the country, Boots said today they're required by law to test their medicines on animals. That, the company believes, may have made them a target.
Boots have been a target for some time, simply I think because they're on the high street. There's no other more logical reason. There are loads of pharmaceutical companies producing new medicines. Why pick on Boots? I think just because they're a household name.
Security checks are continuing in all the company's 1,100 outlets. It's hoped video evidence from in-store security cameras will help to trace the bombers.
3 lorry drivers imprisoned for nearly a month in Turkey are back home tonight with their families. They say they were the unwitting victims of a huge fraud and have no intention of going back to Turkey to give evidence.
Celebrations all round tonight for Peter Thomas, home at last and reunited with his family. It had been an anxious time for wife Lorraine and daughter Jane as they waited for Peter, who'd spent Christmas in a Turkish jail. Safely on British soil, he relived his worst moment.
They started to unload the truck on the afternoon, and I thought, well, what have I done? I knew I'd done nothing wrong, but I thought, what went through my mind, there could have been drugs on there, which I knew nothing about, and I could have ended up doing, well, God knows, you know, 8, 20 years or whatever, like, you know, through no fault of mine.
The Bristol truck driver was held with 2 others from Yorkshire after Turkish border guards accused them of carrying false documents. Their 3-week experience of Turkish prison life, grim.
Conditions were terrible. Human excrement on the walls in the cell, which we had to clean out before we moved in it, by the way. Mattresses just stunk of urine.
Their trucks have been impounded by the Turkish authorities, who are expecting them back in court in January. Today they maintain their total innocence and said they wouldn't be going back. Oliver Phillips, ITN in Gatwick.
The Downing Street Peace Initiative was left further in limbo tonight after the IRA insisted that the struggle for self-determination continues. The organisation said in a New Year message that the right of the Irish people to decide their own future and the question of lasting peace are inextricably linked. It neither welcomed nor rejected the peace initiative. A final decision on that is still some weeks away. The Archbishop of Canterbury is flying out to the Sudan tonight for a visit that's caused a diplomatic row before the plane has even landed. Dr. George Carey has cancelled a visit to the Muslim north of the country because its government insisted he went there as its guest rather than the church's. When he arrived at Heathrow a little while ago, Dr. Carey refused to comment on the controversy and said he would have more to say when he returned.
The decision to restrict his visit to the Christian-dominated south of Sudan follows months of wrangling over whether or not the Muslim fundamentalist government in the north would allow the Archbishop, as a guest of the Anglican Church, the freedom to go where he wanted.
It was because we weren't sure that we would have had the freedom to move as we wished, that we felt it would be better to make the point by not going at all, rather than risking the visit being hijacked by the government.
The Archbishop had planned to complain to the government of the north about reports of Christians being persecuted. But a government supporter in London said Dr. Carey would have been free to go wherever he wished.
In fact, this meets with the government policy itself. The government is there to invite people to see for themselves. That is the only way to beat the distorted image of the Sudan.
The Archbishop will still get a warm welcome. The influence of the Anglican Church in southern Sudan is growing. But Dr. Carey, who left London tonight, said he still hoped to have a dialogue with the Muslim leaders, but that would now have to be shelved for some time in the future.
The stock market hit another record high today as investors put their money on a cut in interest rates in the new year. Optimism was fueled further by a prediction that house prices would start rising above the rate of inflation next year.
The holidays meant city dealing rooms were sparsely populated today, but that didn't prevent shares storming to a new high. The market's anticipating higher company profits and lower interest rates. But the share boom is not guaranteed to last.
The actual rate of rise that we're seeing on a day-by-day basis is too fast to be sustained. But the trend, the underlying trend, can go through well into the end of the first quarter of the year.
House prices could prove a safer, though less spectacular bet than shares. Britain's biggest building society, the Halifax, says prices will rise by 5% next year.
There aren't many threats to the housing market in 1994. There is, of course, the reduction in mortgage interest tax relief to come through in April, but that will probably be offset by further mortgage rate cuts.
The latest survey of company directors noted a modest increase in business confidence. A growing number of companies plan to take on workers. For some, wishes of a prosperous new year may actually be fulfilled.
And that's it from us. Good night.